The year is 2005. Due to Nvidia ceasing the original Xbox's GPU, which forced the console's discontinuation, Microsoft is set to release its successor, the Xbox 360, in November, giving them a significant head start against their competition. After being revealed in an MTV special on May 12th, everyone in the gaming world has their sights set on E3, scheduled to take place less than a week later. The big question? Having already started the 7th generation in the handheld market, how will Nintendo and Sony respond to Microsoft's new home console? Hey everyone, I'm Skull902 and today, I'm gonna tell you the story of the best and worst console launches of all time, which happened only 2 days apart. Let's first discuss what Nintendo and Sony were up against. Microsoft elaborated on the 360 in their press conference on an inclined circular stage that the audience surrounded to give off the idea of the all-encompassing entertainment experience they were going for. They announced the 360 would be available later in the year, with the first ever wireless controller bundle, HD video, backwards compatibility, new features for Xbox Live, and announced a string of exclusive games. A solid press conference for sure, but there were some things the other two could use to their favor. Plenty of the 360 games shown off wouldn't be available until the latter half of the next year, and the only notable showings for the original Xbox were all multiplats. The ball is in the competition's court. It's now their job to convince the masses to wait another year to pick up their systems. How did they fare? Sony's presser was a mostly boring showcase of the PS3 specs. Yes, the stuff they're saying is impressive for the time, but the average person isn't going to care about what the GPU is or whatever. Points, however, must be given for the HDMI support, backwards compatibility with the PS1 and 2, which turned out much better than the 360's OG Xbox support, and future-proofing with the use of Blu-ray. Some of the other stuff, again, either didn't sound interesting or was ditched, like the dual monitor support. But they're still games. So, what was announced for the new console? Mostly games that wouldn't be out for another 2 years at the earliest. Ouch. But they can still hold people over with some exclusive PS2 titles! And they only announced one new game for the system. Sure, it's Final Fantasy XII, but you gotta have something for everyone. It's almost like you're dismissing your install base. There wasn't a single announcement for PSP games either. Overall, it felt very stilted and awkward, which gives off the impression that they had little confidence in the PS3, whereas Microsoft's presentation brimmed with optimism over the new platform. The extremely subdued crowd reaction to the console's reveal speaks a lot to just how underdone this conference was. However, maybe we should give Sony the benefit of the doubt. Xbox had been outselling them for the previous half year, but PS2 was the clear winner of the 6th gen by that point anyway. They could ride out the next year no problem. Though, just for comparison's sake, let's see what Nintendo had to say. The Big N started off promising a revolution, and we'll get to that, but hey look, they're actually showing off games for the Game Boy Advance, DS, and GameCube for the next year. They also announced Wi-Fi Play for the DS, the micro model of the GBA, and indeed, unveiled their new Revolution system due for release the next year, which would not only support all GameCube software, but feature a download service called the Virtual Console for classic games from previous generations, and games for franchises old and new were on the way. Nintendo had a clear message at this conference. They were going to change the game like they were known to do because gaming is for everyone. Their presentation and speakers, for the most part, gave off all the right vibes. Reggie talks with authority and confidence as though Nintendo and their products were the one true gaming experience. Iwata brims with pride and speaks with a smile for most of his presentation. The speakers are having fun, cracking jokes, or making statements.
Global sell-through for Nintendo DS stands at over 5 million, or more than twice the level for the PSP. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Well, the PSP hasn't arrived in Europe yet. So we got there when we said we would, and they didn't. You know what? That's Sony's issue, not my problem.
There's a live musical performance with a song composed entirely of sounds from a DS game. An incredible showing. Just listen to the crowd roar in excitement to see the revolution.
And now you say, you want a revolution? Well, we've got one.
Safe to say, in my opinion, Nintendo did a hell of a lot more to try and keep their fans from buying a 360 than Sony did. But of course, this is only the beginning of the story. Let's see where everyone's at a year later. Going into the 2006 E3, Microsoft has done quite well for themselves, getting a good head start with nearly 5 million 360s sold, though hardware shortages in the launch window hurt their numbers a bit. While Sony was helped by sales of their hardware, particularly the PSP, and Nintendo, whose new system was renamed the Wii, had a firm grip on the handheld market, this E3 was mainly about the future. So again, let's see what the Japanese console giants were going to have to contend with for the next year. Microsoft immediately set the tone by showing a trailer for Gears of War right at the start, with Cliff Bleszinski demoing the game for the audience on stage afterward. Cliff throws it over to Peter Moore, who says that Microsoft's vision puts games first. Interesting to see how that would change. Most of the technical stuff is a repeat of what they said the previous year with the exception of cross-platform connectivity. However, they announced a good chunk of classic titles coming to the Xbox Live Arcade, and they've upped the ante for some of these games by incorporating online play, achievements, and leaderboards that'll get overrun by hackers. For the big game reveals, we've got Lost Planet Extreme Condition, Mass Effect, Viva Pinata, Ignore This One, Dead Rising, Crackdown, as well as Grand Theft Auto 4, with a fun potshot at Sony included.
Some guys do rubber ducks, some guys do tattoos.
This presser lost some of that confidence I felt with the last year's showing due to some of the presenters' awkwardness, Bill Gates being the most surprising of the bunch, but even though he too had his moments, Peter Moore really carried the presentation. They were clear about what they wanted to do for Xbox with a big showing of upcoming games, though it does lose points for a couple of them taking multiple years to finally get released. A good conference, I think. Oh, and how could I forget? It ends with that epic as all hell reveal trailer for Halo 3, a clear showing that Xbox isn't fucking around. Let's go to Nintendo next. They also set the stage right off the bat by demonstrating what the system's all about, with the cool grandpa himself, Shigeru Miyamoto, playing an early build of Wii Music. Reggie comes out to say that what they've got in store isn't just next, but new, with a library of games that can appeal to everyone, the idea being that it's the next step in evolving video games as a medium. This philosophy is shown clearly with titles like Super Mario Galaxy, Wii Sports, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Ignore This One Too, and Rayman Raving Rabbids. But the DS isn't left behind either. To go along with the new light model, there's new Super Mario Bros., Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue Rescue Team with Red for the GBA, Yoshi's Island DS, The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, as well as the remakes of Diddy Kong Racing and Final Fantasy III. Iwata shows up to explain how their new approach will work, from all sorts of connectivity options to the new styles of play, and the Virtual Console's offering of classic content to entice gamers old and new alike. The presser ends with Reggie reiterating that the company is about inclusion and the experience of playing. Once again, it was a good conference. A promising library of games were shown for the Wii and DS, Reggie still had that bombastic, confident delivery, Iwata still had his look of proudness, and Miyamoto looked like he was having a load of fun. They got that everyone's invited message out loud and clear, greatly demonstrated by having the winner of a contest come on stage and play a game of Wii Tennis at the end. And while it wasn't part of the conference, I'd be remiss to not mention the hype incarnate Super Smash Bros. Brawl trailer dropping at the event. Though, just like Microsoft, I feel their showing was a downgrade from the previous years due to some awkwardness with some of the speakers and gameplay showcases. Considering the trend, surely Sony will take a note of what went wrong last time and make an improvement, right?
Well, just one year ago, we stood before you, our industry friends and partners, and unveiled our plans for PlayStation 3 for the very first time. The game is powered by Namco. It's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
Genji 2 is an action game which is based on Japanese history. First, I'm going to have to defeat this large enemy character here. So here's this giant enemy crab.
But it's not what it looks like, it's what it does. So let's switch to the demo. And clearly, a little secret is waiting to be unveiled. Now, share with the audience what you think this means for you as a game designer.
Well, it's incredibly exhilarating. The team and I are incredibly impressed with the sensitivity, the weight, everything about this new controller is what we were hoping for the PlayStation 3. And it marks an interesting moment for us because it allows us to change from static control mechanics to very kinetic control mechanics. And as a developer and a gamer, I'm incredibly excited about this possibility.
And the 60 gigabyte PlayStation 3 for $599 US. And as I mentioned previously, at E3 this year, we have a sampling of titles for PlayStation 3 playable for the very first time.
Okay, I'll mention the positives first, but even then there's this weird flip side to them. All except for Bubber Ducky's cameo, that was fantastic. I like how they committed to their PS2 user base by vowing not to immediately abandon the system, but it also felt like they didn't really care enough to show what'd be in store for them. All the PS2 game announcements were put on a PowerPoint slide before being quickly brushed away and never mentioned again afterward. There's promise in the PSP and PS3 connectivity, but what they had to show for it was really unimpressive. We've seen how awkward the presenters came off already, but there's more. All except for EA and Insomniac, anytime gameplay was demonstrated, the developer commentary was either bad, weirdly paced, or just straight up non-existent with little to no explanation of how what we're seeing takes advantage of the console's power. They didn't even get into the technical side of things too much, but touted online features on PSN as something similar to that of Xbox Live. The thing about that is that it was all talk and no show, which doesn't make it look enticing. Microsoft did just the opposite talking about XBL on the 360 the year before. It gives the audience an idea of how these things work and helps that conference be as good as it was. I think Sony showed off far more games in this presser than their competition did in theirs. However, the PSP showcase looked pretty goddamn weak, and when it comes to the PS3, sure, they had some notable titles such as Heavenly Sword, Resistance Fall of Man, Uncharted, Assassin's Creed. Fucking, would you get out of here? Final Fantasy XIII, and Metal Gear Solid 4, but even among those ones, only the former two had gameplay footage, not to mention the latter two wouldn't be released until 2008 at the earliest. I think showing as many games as they did hurt Sony, to be honest. We have those 6 games that stood out, but then there's all this other stuff here which makes the system's library look like a sea of mediocrity. Some of it was either cancelled outright or, even worse, in the case of 8 Days, they tried to mask CGI as in-game footage to make the system look more impressive than it actually was. So what we're left with is a system they had to lie about, with a lack of readily available or soon-to-come quality titles, and uncertainties about their online service and connectivity with other devices, that this guy says will turn him into a monkey. Is that really worth paying $599 US for when, at the same time, the 360 cost $200 less and the Wii was going to launch even cheaper? What a horrendous conference. Gonna be honest, it's not looking good for Sony here. Microsoft and Nintendo had conferences that declined from the previous year, but the PlayStation boys fucked up. There's a lot stacked against them in the next year and not a lot of time to make up for that. But, thankfully for Sony, there still is time. So, let's jump ahead half a year and see how they and Nintendo handled the marketing for their soon-to-launch consoles. After all, a great ad campaign oftentimes makes the difference. So it's the middle of November and people are chomping at the bit for these 2 new consoles. Meanwhile, Microsoft is trying to woo potential customers away with the allure of Gears of War, which itself had a fantastic ad campaign. They also did that weird Burger King promotion, but that's beside the point. PlayStation 3 released first on November 17th. Sony, you made some mistakes at E3, but now's the time to really sell this thing to people. How are you doing that? Weird art house bullshit that paints the system as some kind of test subject. Everyone knows about the fucked up baby, but these other ones are almost just as incomprehensible. Leaking oil? An exploding Rubik's Cube? Eggs and birds? Whatever the hell this is supposed to represent? This is how you're demonstrating what your new platform has to offer? I think the guy waving his controller around with no commentary at E3 did a better job explaining what Sixaxis does better than that fucking ad. Even the ones for the games are more about the strange visuals than actually explaining what the game is. Oh, look how this car's getting destroyed. Okay, here's some game footage. Oh, but now the car's about to explode. Blow up the wall. Yeah, there's a game here, whatever. Ooh, spooky skull. With the weird sights and that ominous droning sound in these ads, you know what that doesn't make me want to do? Buy a PS3. Congrats guys, you failed. Just 2 days later, on November 19th, the Wii was released. For the sake of comparison, look at these ads. These 2 guys visit people of all sorts, all ages, from all walks of life with different styles. When the door is answered, the 2 men politely state their case with 5 simple words.
We would like to play.
Everyone looks like they're having the goddamn time of their lives with this new technology. Not only did it feel extremely inviting, Not only did it give off the message that the system was for everyone, but it made the Wii out to be an overwhelmingly fun console to play on, and a true innovation in gaming, even if, technically speaking, Sega beat them to motion controls on the Dreamcast by over half a decade. I'm gonna say right now that no console ad campaign did a better job making their system look desirable than Nintendo did here with the Wii. Some may disagree, but the results show. Once the sales figures came in for the holiday season, it was pretty evident that the PS3 was going to face an uphill battle. Sony had to be thanking their lucky stars that PS2 sales made up for what they lacked with the new system. One could argue that it didn't initially sell more due to hardware shortages, but a look at sales figures around half a year later indicates that they really weren't doing much to help the system. By the time the Wii surpassed the 360 in mid-2007 for first place in the 7th gen, the PS3 was a distant third, nearly 4 million units behind the 360. The pre-launch mistakes they made really hurt them, and a lack of interesting titles post-launch was making it worse. Just for comparison's sake, Sony didn't really have a big huge mega release in 2007. What did their competition offer that year? Halo 3 and Super Mario Galaxy. Ouch. I remember back in the day when I first got familiar with YouTube, people were really wondering if this would be it for PlayStation. That's how bad it got. But, fortunately for Sony and gamers everywhere, good things come to those who wait. What happened afterward then? Well, the Wii continued to dominate for the next couple years on the strength of titles like the aforementioned Mario Galaxy and Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and the 360 maintained a solid second place. With only a few standout titles by the middle of 2009, Sony changed up their strategy with the introduction of the slim model PS3. The ad campaign to go along with it was brilliantly done. Just a bunch of funny ads with a character named Kevin Butler who answered the inquiries of players who had questions about the system and its games. Speaking of which, new titles such as sequels to the God of War, Uncharted, and Ratchet & Clank series, as well as Infamous 1 and 2, Heavy Rain, and The Last of Us released over the next few years turned the PS3 into a contender. Not even the disastrous security breach of PSN in 2011 could slow down the momentum they'd been building up. Meanwhile, after the 2008 holiday season, the Wii had gone from a hot commodity to a dime a dozen. That's not even for a lack of good titles or anything, it's just that basically everyone had one at that point. While the gap got smaller, Nintendo would ultimately claim the 7th gen as theirs. However, Sony would avenge themselves as by the time the generation ended, and though it was by less than 5 million units, they crawled their way into second place. The good buzz they were going off of would help the PS4's launch as well, no doubt given a boost by less than stellar rollouts of the Wii U and Xbox One. Sony held a good lead in sales between both generations for around 8 years until the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017. If there's anything to be learned from this story, I suppose it's that you can almost always make something good out of a bad situation and dig yourself out of it. Momentum shifts are very much a thing in the landscape of video games. Microsoft had a bunch of goodwill until the Xbone's pre-release hype, which they still haven't really recovered from. It's all about being able to make up for bad moves with good ones, and I'd say Sony did that with the PS3. That'll just about do it for my nostalgic look back on this wonderful bygone era. Seriously, those Wii ads were fucking masterpieces. If you haven't seen any, I implore you to look them up. In any case, I have been Skull902, thank you for watching, and have yourselves a wonderful day.
This is another example. Whoops.
And you attack its weak point for massive damage.